But the collecting of herbs is a whole interesting subject because there are ritual protocols that have to be followed. And so here's some examples of rules that would help make the herbs the most powerful. You go before sunrise, not speaking to anyone on the way. Or you go on Midsummer Eve, or on the equinox, or on the new moon, or the full moon. And often they dig roots at midnight. Trace a circle around the plant, tie a ribbon on it to destine it for harvest. Don't let iron touch the herb. There's a fairy connection. The fairies abhor iron. And maybe this is a very old memory of Indo-European invasions, that, this is an enemy substance. But they want the fairies. They want the spirit power in the herb not to be chased away. And then, very important, to speak the purpose for which the herb is gathering. Talk to the herb, thank the herb, invoke her, the spirit of the plant, and praise her virtues. Offer perhaps honey, wine, or grain. So, for example, in Hungary, they gave, in gathering belladonna, they gave bread, salt, and spices to Nagy Asszony. This is the great lady in Hungarian. And so I just mentioned before, but some traditions forbade using iron to cut the plant. It drove off fairies. And here's an old herbalist from a German storybook. Even in classical times, you have Latin sources referring to using a brass or a golden sickle to gather herbs. So maybe, even then, not iron being used. And so in Scotland, the custom was for the person who was gathering the plant to state their intention, what they will use it for, and address her with respect and honor as if speaking to a noble person. And here's a quote from the Carmina Gadelica. In the case of St. John's wort, they say they will pluck the plant with their right hand and preserve it with their left. So the right hand is for taking, and the left hand is for receiving and holding. Peony was very highly esteemed, and in France especially, you have ritual addresses to pivoine is the word in French. So people would say, "Good day, holy plant pivoine. You are queen of the plants." That's from the Codex Matritensis. One source says she was the object of a veritable cult. So over time, a lot of these names become Christianized, and St. John's wort is a perfect example of that. Our Lady's bedstraw, which good folk call Holy Marys. This is from an index of pagan superstitions from the 700s. So they're already trying to rename. Don't use those old pagan names. Let's use the saints' names. And that was their way of, actually it helped to preserve the traditions, but there was also a loss involved in that. And so Our Lady's bedstraw is good for dreaming and protection in sleep or in childbirth. Swedes called it Freya's hair, but later Virgin Mary's bedstraw. Germans called it Muttergottes Bettstraw, God's mother's bedstraw. And they also used it as a childbirth herb, and they would put it in the mother's dress, right directly against her body to protect her. And then we have our contraceptive herbs and abortifacients. A lot of these are emmenagogues. They would make make your blood come. And so we have tansy and wild carrot and rue and pennyroyal as some of the herbs named. And with pennyroyal, this is a very strong plant. It's not something to be used lightly, but women have resorted to it as an abortifacient in many conditions, in many situations. Rue, though, there's a whole body of pagan lore about rue. In Italy, they call her Madonna Ruta and address her again as a noble lady. It's protective, it's purifying, it's said to bring luck and success and love, and it also to enhance spiritual qualities. So it has ritual uses as well as medicinal ones. So the Italian folk healers would speak to Madonna Ruta, and there's a book called The Gospel of the Witches that was gathered by a folklorist in the late 1800s, in which Diana counsels the witches and says, if you want to keep evil people far from you, you should always keep rue with you and vervain. And just going outside of Europe for a moment, we know that in Maya country and also in the Andes, curanderas are using rue as kind of a ritual brush to whisk people's bodies and they will asperge someone, would sprinkle them with water, but they use it as an aura cleanser, brushing and whisking and removing negative energies from the body-mind. Here's another spell from the Witch's Gospel. This is from a Tuscan woman named Maddalena, who told all of this to Charles Leland. Some people think, well, he really made this all up. He was trying to get information to fill his thesis of the survival of a goddess of the witches. And so it was really dismissed. But I don't believe this, because his translations of these charms are really Victorian and stiff, but the Italian is very folk feeling to it. So here's an example. I rise in the morning at dawn, and I go forth to walk through vales, mountains, and fields. I seek fortune from rue and vervain, which I know bring fortune. I keep them enclosed in my breast that no one should know, and so I command it. O vervain, do good for me, bless that witch, that fairy who shows me. At midnight, I go out into a field. I bear water, wine, and salt, and my talisman. So there are these ritual repetitions in these charms, these Italian charms. And speaking of, we saw already with rue, but also vervain. This is a plant that we already know that the Druids revered, and we have Latin sources referring to that. And they saw it as a prophetic herb that was used in casting lots. So they would gather it in the dark of the moon, or at the rising of the Sirius, the star Sirius, or at noon. And it was used a lot in purifying lustrations. So they would dip the plant into water and they would shake it over someone, maybe also animals as well as people. And another name for vervain is the herb of grace, or the enchanter's plant. So it retained through the Middle Ages. These old traditions were carried along. And here we have an example of it shown from an herbal manual with a serpent, because it wards off venom. And you see these snakes showing up a lot in those manuals. Then foxglove. And this is called lus mor in Gaelic, the great herb. In Welsh, Manach Elilin, the good people's glove. And there's a whole group of peasant names for foxglove: fairy bells, fairy herb, fairy caps, fairy gloves, fairy thimbles, fairy fingers, fairy weed, fairy petticoats, goblin gloves, witches' gloves, granny's gloves, or granny's bonnets. So, the fairy connection with some of these herbs is very strong. And this, again, the fairies are divinities of the land. They are sometimes also ancestral spirit, and they overlap with goddesses in European folk tradition. So here's a preservation of a chant from the Scots, and this is out of the Carmina Gadelica by Carmichael. Pluck will I the fairy wort, with expectation from the fairy bower, to overcome every oppression, as long as it be fairy wort, fairy wort, fairy wort. I envy the one who has thee. There is nothing the sun encircles, but is to her a sure victory. And some German traditions talk about a nameless blue wonder flower that gives the vision of hidden treasures to a shepherd when he sticks it in his hat. Or a plant that the mermaid dug on the mount that might not be touched, makes whoever eats it understand the wild animal, fowl, and fish. For Slovenians, a fern seed falls into a cowherd's shoe, and it confers the power to understand the language of animals. So it's very often common people who are being referred to in these traditions. And the humble folk who are made worthy not by social rank, but by spirit selection. And the plant confers these second sight, these powers on them. Now this is a rare example of maybe around the 1200s of an herbal manual. This is called the Catonis Distica in England. And it shows women using medicine bags and talismans. And if you look at this, she has a pouch at her waist. This is common. The witches are hanging things off their belt. All women did, their tools. It's like their purse. But she has another bag, a very unusual triangular shaped bag, with two others suspended from this. So I'm reading this as a medicine bag. And we also see them binding herbs onto the arms of people. And this is really rare to see a picture of this, but we have written references going all the way back to the 7th century from both France and Spain, where bishops are attacking the arolae and the areolae. This is the female and male forms of this word, which refers both to diviners and healers. And so they were binding herbs on people to cure them. And the clergy are vigorously denouncing anybody who went to secret places in the woods in order to be treated by the areolae and the arolae. And here's another one from the same manuscript, and we see cupping in use. Some of you may have had this done by acupuncturists. It's very common practice in various parts of the world, suction being used to pull blood to the surface. And the idea is you're pulling out negative energies. In Chinese medicine, they would say you're getting rid of negative qi. And so cupping treatment here on the back, which is a very common spot for it. So now we come to the herbal manuals, and these, as I mentioned before, are for and by doctors, the beginnings of the medical profession in the 1200s. They're just only beginning to start to have degrees in medicine. So this is the last time where we see women herbalists being pictured, and sometimes in the presence of male physicians, who you can see over there on the left. On the right side, you can see the male physician. But here the story is they're giving an herbal fomentation of pennyroyal for nausea, and they're treating a child with digestive troubles. And this one shows a woman smoking a baby with Artemisia tagantes in order to remove energies of illness. And you can see a brazier there that's flaming on the floor, and then the herb is being held up there. So once again, this is a relative of mugwort being used to cleanse, and this is true not only for medieval Europe, but we also see in China members of the same family. Mugwort is used by acupuncturists in Max Dashu. Same thing, smudging with this same plan. And also in North America, where you have desert sage, also a member of this same herbal family, and the same purpose, removing negative energies. Blessing. This is Italian from Florence around the 1300s, and the herbalist here is shown applying a poultice of poppy to a headache patient. And it looks like he is also being sweated, either in a bed or an herbal bath. It's kind of hard to tell. But medicated sweats are something that we see continuing on, and this is something that the Beguines were still practicing in their hospitals in the same time period. And we know that poppy was used for insomnia, headache, and also to relieve the pains of childbirth. There was a roaring trade in opium poppies and the extract from them in ancient times, and it was widely used for the pain in childbirth.